The second she shut the door behind her, I knew I was locked out of more than just our apartment. I stood there in the hallway, barefoot, holding a half-sliced lime in one hand and a drink I made for her in the other. Her laugh was still echoing down the stairwell, bouncing off the cold cement walls like it belonged to someone I'd never met. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was triumphant, sharp, like she'd just played a cruel joke and was walking away before I realized the punchline. 10 minutes earlier, she was getting ready in the bedroom, humming something off-key. Her hair was curled, her heels were louder than usual, and she wore the perfume I asked her not to wear around other guys. The one she said was just a scent. She'd told me the party was just for girls. A low-key thing. But that didn't explain why she triple-checked her reflection in the hallway mirror and spent 20 minutes choosing between two lipsticks that looked identical to me. When I asked who else was going, she didn't look up from her phone. She just said, "The usual." The usual doesn't usually text her at midnight with a fire emoji and a black heart. So I followed her. Yeah, I know how that sounds. I didn't plan to. But when she walked out and said I shouldn't wait up, with a smirk I'd never seen before, something inside me just snapped loose. She didn't notice me get into my car. I stayed 2 blocks behind her the whole time, headlights off, palms sweating. I didn't feel like myself. I felt like a passenger in my own body, like someone else had taken the wheel and was whispering, "Just see where she's going. Just know the truth for once." And I did. She didn't go to her friends. She didn't even head toward the neighborhood she mentioned. She drove 20 minutes the opposite direction, to a bar neither of us had ever stepped foot in together. She parked, checked her lipstick in the mirror, sat there for a second, then smiled at her phone like it had kissed her. I watched her get out and hand her keys, my keys, to a guy leaning on a black SUV. He wasn't part of the usual. He wrapped his arm around her like he owned her, like he'd done it before, like he knew the shape of her better than I did. They went inside. I couldn't move. I sat there with the engine idling and the fan rattling like it knew what was coming. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just watched the taillights of her world drive further away from mine. I stayed there for 27 minutes. Then I drove home, opened the fridge, and stared at the 2 steaks I'd bought that morning. I was supposed to grill them while she came home tipsy and tired and giddy. I had champagne chilling. I even bought sparklers, like an idiot. She loved dumb little things like that. I spent the rest of the night pacing, watching the parking lot, waiting for headlights that never came. And when she finally did come home, at 4:17 a.m., she didn't look tired. She looked satisfied. She kissed my cheek and said, "You didn't have to wait up." And that's when I knew the version of her I loved was gone. She dropped it. Not on purpose, no. It slipped from her clutch when she tried to kick her heels off and laughed too loud in the dark. I was sitting on the couch pretending to be asleep, blanket pulled halfway up, face turned toward the wall. My eyes were open. My pulse was racing. I heard her keys hit the tray, heard the low buzz of her phone still lighting up from a conversation she hadn't finished. Then came the thud, the tiny, pathetic thud of her phone landing near the hallway rug. She muttered something, giggled again, and walked barefoot into the kitchen. The fridge opened. I heard a bottle clink. She never drank water after nights out, only wine. That alone said more than anything on her phone ever could. I waited. 30 seconds. Then I stood up, knees shaking, and walked silently to where it had fallen. The screen was cracked, just a thin spiderweb at the corner. Notifications were still sliding down one by one. She hadn't bothered to silence them. Or maybe she'd gotten too comfortable. First name I saw, Micah. Not saved with an emoji, not hidden under a girl's name. Just Micah. The most recent message read, "Still wearing that mark? Or did the shower wash me off?" I sat back down on the floor. I didn't open the rest. I didn't need to. That one sentence felt like it had taken a steel-toed boot to my stomach. My head felt hot. My fingers went numb. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, and I still saw the words glowing behind my eyelids. By the time she came back down the hall, barefoot, wine glass in one hand, pretending like nothing in the universe was cracked open between us, I had placed the phone exactly where she dropped it, like I hadn't touched it, like I hadn't seen enough to destroy what was left of me. She sat down beside me on the couch. Not close, just near enough to breathe the same air. She looked at me, confused. "Why are you up?" I don't know how I said it, but I smiled. "God help me," I smiled. I said, "Just couldn't sleep." She leaned her head back and closed her eyes. "Me neither." You know those nights where your body's tired but your mind just keeps going? I nodded. I didn't tell her my mind had just gone all the way off the cliff. She asked if I'd rub her shoulders. And I did. I rubbed the shoulders of the woman who had just come back from someone else's arms. And as I ran my fingers over her skin, I saw a faint mark. A purplish bloom behind her left shoulder. Not something you'd get from dancing. Not something you'd get from sitting in a bar sipping cocktails. No, that was deliberate. Intimate. I said nothing. She said nothing. We both sat there, the silence stretching out like the hour before a storm hits. And all I could think about was how much effort she put into making me believe she was still mine. When she went to bed, she didn't kiss me goodnight. She didn't even look back. And when I finally stood up to turn off the lights, her wine glass was still full. She hadn't taken a single sip. Our building recently installed new hallway cameras, supposedly for safety, after someone's Amazon packages kept going missing. I remember how annoyed Brianna was when they sent out the notice, saying it felt invasive. I didn't think much of that comment back then. But now? Now it echoes louder than everything else she's ever said to me. At 5:34 a.m., long after she fell asleep and well before sunrise, I pulled up the building security app on my laptop. Just curiosity, I told myself. Just need to see if she came home alone. Just want to confirm something simple so I can go back to sleep and stop imagining her with someone else. But that's not what happened. She walked into frame at 4:17 a.m. sharp. Alone. For 3 seconds. Then he stepped into view. Micah. I didn't know his face until that moment, but some part of me recognized him instantly. Maybe it was the smug ease in his stride, or the way he leaned against the wall after handing her back the keys like they belonged to him. She was laughing again. Laughing like the hallway was a private theater and he was her favorite show. No tension. No guilt. Not even a glance toward the camera. She kissed his cheek, casually, like it wasn't the first time, and he whispered something in her ear that made her bite her lip. Then he left. She stayed in the hallway for another few seconds, fixing her hair in the reflection of the elevator doors, as if preparing to play the role of fiancé again. And then she walked in. Past the front door I opened for her 1,000 times. Into the home I built for her from scratch. Into the place we'd planned to raise kids. Hang pictures. Grow old. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just saved the clip to a hidden folder on my hard drive and stared at the playback bar as if it would offer me answers. It didn't. Later, I deleted the footage. I'm not even sure why. Maybe because if it stayed, it meant I'd have to do something about it. Maybe because some part of me still hoped I could pretend I never saw it. Or maybe, deep down, I didn't want anyone else, not even myself, to witness just how clearly I had been replaced. She woke up a few hours later. Hair messy. Hoodie on backwards. She stretched and yawned like the world was still spinning the way she left it. You look like you didn't sleep, she said, pouring cereal into a mug because all the bowls were in the dishwasher. I told her I'd had a weird dream. She laughed. Hopefully not about me again. You always say I do awful things in your dreams. I didn't answer. Instead, I said I might go visit my brother in Tallahassee. A total lie. I haven't spoken to him in months. But I needed a reason to vanish for the day. I needed distance. Not to cry or rage, but to think, to breathe in a space where her scent wasn't clinging to the curtains. She nodded. Yeah, sure. You should go. Might be good for you. Good for me. Like I was the one who needed fixing. I left an hour later. She barely looked up from her phone. But before I walked out the door, I looked back once. Just to see if she'd watch me leave. She didn't. And that told me everything. I didn't go to Tallahassee. I didn't even make it out of the city. I parked in the lot behind an old diner off Route 36, ordered a coffee I didn't drink, and sat in my car with the engine off and my phone screen glowing against the dashboard. My hands hovered for a while before I tapped it open, our location-sharing app. It was something we started years ago. A sweet, dumb thing. Just in case, we'd said. In case her tire went flat. In case I locked my keys inside the car again. I never stopped sharing mine. She never stopped sharing hers. I don't think she remembered it even existed. That morning, it showed she wasn't home. Her little blue dot was parked 2 neighborhoods over. Not at work. Not at a coffee shop. Not even near a friend's place. Just still. Still and settled in the driveway of some bland, beige-roofed house with no name, no tag, no story. It was 8:46 a.m. She'd left the apartment not long after me. I didn't hear the door, but I guess I was too busy watching footage in my head, over and over again. She said she had a Zoom call at 9. I'll just do it from home, she muttered. Liar. She never planned to stay. She never even opened her laptop. I stared at the dot on the map, just watching, not breathing, not even blinking. It didn't move for 27 minutes. Then it disappeared. She'd turned off location sharing. No message. No reason. Just gone. 1 second she existed. The next, she didn't. I sat there, phone burning hot in my hand, and realized something I'd been avoiding for weeks, maybe months. She wasn't being careless. She was being strategic. She knew what she was doing. Every move was calibrated. Every lie was spaced just enough from the last one to keep me hopeful, but never secure. She left just enough warmth in the relationship to keep it alive, but not enough to stop it from rotting underneath. I drove aimlessly for the next hour. Past her office. Past the gym she never actually went in anymore. Past the bridal boutique where she tried on that stupid dress with me in the mirror behind her, grinning like a fool. That dress is still in the closet. Probably forgotten. Probably irrelevant now. I ended up in front of a motel. Not a fancy one. Not one of those crime scene-looking places, either. Just a bland, beige building with crooked numbers on the doors. The kind of place where people go when they don't want to be recognized. Her car was there. I recognized the dent on the left rear bumper. She claimed someone backed into her in a parking garage. I offered to pay for the repairs. She said it wasn't worth the hassle. It's funny, the way you become blind to the truth when you're trying to protect yourself from it. I sat across the street for nearly 2 hours. When she finally emerged, she wasn't alone. Micah again. This time he kissed her in daylight. Full on. Hands on her waist. Her arms around his neck. No rush. No hiding. Just them. Two people who had clearly done this before. Two people who were confident they wouldn't get caught. Because, in her mind, I wasn't even a threat anymore. She didn't look around. Didn't check her phone. Didn't think for a second that I might be watching. And honestly, I'm not even sure she'd care if she knew. I wanted to get out. To scream. To walk up and demand something, anything. An explanation. An apology. A reason. But I didn't move. Instead, I watched her climb into his passenger seat like she belonged there. And then they drove off. I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just felt this strange emptiness settle in my chest, like someone had scooped out everything I used to be and left me on autopilot. That was the moment I knew she wasn't mine anymore. She hadn't been for a long time. And maybe I never really had her at all. I didn't go home after that. I couldn't. The thought of walking back into the apartment where she kissed me goodnight, where her perfume still clung to the hallway curtains, where my toothbrush still stood beside hers like they belonged together, it made my skin crawl. Instead, I parked at the far end of a Target lot and watched the rain gather in beads on my windshield. I didn't listen to music. I didn't check my phone. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding me in place. Hours passed. Eventually, I drove to my friend Nolan's place and told him I needed to crash on the couch. He didn't ask why. Maybe he could see it on my face, the kind of look people have when something they depended on suddenly disappeared. I didn't tell him anything. Not yet. Part of me was still trying to figure out if any of this was real. The next morning, I went back. Not home. Back to the motel. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to punish myself. Maybe I needed to know if it was truly as bad as it felt. Or maybe, deep down, I still had some delusional hope that she'd wake up and realize what she was doing. That she'd walk outside, see her reflection in the car window, and drive straight home to me. To the man who memorized the shape of the scar on her ankle. Who remembered the exact song she played the first time she made me soup when I was sick. But that's not what happened. At 9:14 a.m., the door opened again. She stepped out wearing my hoodie. The navy one with the frayed drawstring she always stole from the laundry basket before I could hang it up. Her hair was tied up, and she looked happy, rested. There was no guilt in her face. No tension. Just the calm energy of someone who had already moved on in her mind. Micah followed her out. This time, he held the door for her like they were on vacation. I recognized something else too, her weekend duffel bag. The one she used when she visited her sister. Only now I knew she hadn't been visiting anyone except the man who stood beside her at the edge of the sidewalk, tossing his car keys in the air like none of this mattered. They got into his car. My hoodie. My bag. Her hand in his lap as they pulled away. It felt like someone had walked into my life, taken what they wanted, and left the shell of it behind. And she didn't even try to hide it. That's what killed me. There was no secret anymore. No attempt to mask the lie. It was open. Raw. as if my place in her world had already been erased and overwritten. When I got back to the apartment that afternoon, she was in the shower. I stood there in the living room, staring at the coat rack where my hoodie used to hang. It wasn't there. It was still on her body, probably crumpled in the backseat of his car while the water ran over her skin in my bathroom. I walked to the bedroom and opened her nightstand drawer. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Proof? A note? A reason? Instead, I found a second phone. It was powered off, tucked beneath a folder of bridal appointment printouts. My heart slammed into my ribs so fast I thought I'd pass out. She had never mentioned a second number. I picked it up like it might bite me. It was heavy. It had a case I didn't recognize. I turned it on. No password. As soon as it powered up, the screen filled with unread messages. Notifications from an app I'd never heard of. Dozens of texts. Voice notes. Photos. Names I didn't recognize. Some messages were from Micah. Some were from others. Others. She had more than one. More than just him. I stood there frozen as the shower stopped and the sound of her footsteps padded down the hall. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even have time to hide the phone. She stepped into the doorway in nothing but a towel, wiping steam from her face, and stopped when she saw me holding it. There was a single second of silence. A beat of stillness where the world didn't spin. Then she said, "You shouldn't have looked through that." No panic. No apology. No denial. Just that. Cold. Flat. Final. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't sorry. She was only sorry I found out. She didn't rush. She didn't grab the phone out of my hand or stumble for an explanation. She didn't even tighten the towel around her chest. She just stood there dripping water onto the hallway carpet, staring at me like I had invaded her privacy. "I told you not to go through my stuff," she said again, this time slower. Like I was a child. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My tongue was dry. My heart was punching holes in my chest. And all I could think about was the folder of names I didn't recognize. The app icons I'd never seen. The audio clips with timestamps that overlapped with moments she said she was with her mother. She walked past me like I was air. Didn't brush me, didn't flinch, just moved around me and picked up the phone off the floor where I must have dropped it. She didn't turn it off. Didn't lock it. Just set it on the counter and said, "We need to talk." I don't know what I expected. A breakdown? A denial? Begging? What I got instead was a conversation over cereal. She wore a hoodie and leggings like it was any other morning. She poured oat milk like it mattered. She didn't even sit across from me at the table. She sat sideways, like someone in a therapist's office, like she was the one preparing for a difficult conversation. She started with, "I think you've made this bigger than it is." I blinked. Just blinked. She kept going. "You've always been sensitive. And I think sometimes you latch onto things and spiral. You've done it before. Remember? When I stayed late at work last year, and you thought I was meeting someone? And it was just my boss needing slides done." I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My jaw was so tight I couldn't get words out. My eyes were on her face, but my brain was still back on that app, those pictures. Her hands on other men. Her voice in short audio messages saying things no one should ever say while wearing an engagement ring. She took another bite of cereal. Then, without meeting my gaze, she said it. "You're not the victim here, Elwood." I think I stopped breathing. She pushed her spoon aside and finally looked me in the eye. "I needed more than what we had. And you knew that. You felt it. You're just upset now because you know it. But deep down, you've always known." I whispered, "Then why didn't you just leave me?" She didn't answer right away. She tapped her nail on the bowl like she was stalling. Then she shrugged, and said, "Because I didn't want to start over. And because I still love you, in a way." In a way. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not exploded. Not shattered. Just split. Quietly. Like old wood finally giving in under pressure. I stood up, walked to the sink, and ran cold water over my hands because I didn't trust myself to keep them still. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger, pale, hunched, shrinking. I said the first clear thing I'd said all morning. "I need time to think." She didn't argue. She just nodded, like this was all part of some sad process she'd rehearsed in her mind 100 times. She got up, walked into the living room, and pulled her laptop onto her knees as if we hadn't just gutted our relationship and tossed its insides onto the kitchen floor. I packed a bag in silence. Just enough for a few days. Jeans. Socks. Chargers. I stared at the ring box on the dresser. It looked like a joke now. A prop from a failed proposal scene. I left it. As I reached for the door, she called out from the couch, not looking up. "Please don't tell anyone." I paused. My hand was on the knob. "About what?" I asked, voice cracking. She hesitated. "About how we're working through something. I don't want people to think we're broken." I stepped outside without answering, and the door clicked shut behind me. But what she didn't know, what I hadn't planned, was that I had already copied the phone. I hadn't even meant to. When I plugged it into my laptop out of pure panic earlier, it auto-synced to my iCloud. Everything. Photos. Messages. Notes. Even deleted ones. She may have tried to erase the truth, but it was already in my hands. I checked into a cheap extended-stay hotel with flickering hallway lights and a coffee machine that spat out something closer to regret than caffeine. I told the receptionist I was taking a break from everything. She didn't ask from what. She just handed me the key and said the ice machine was broken. The room smelled like old carpet and microwave popcorn, and I sat there for hours staring at the TV without turning it on. Her phone, or the clone of it on my laptop, sat in front of me like a curse I didn't want to open. But I did. Of course I did. I started slow. Messages. Screenshots. Images I wish I could unsee. Things she sent late at night when I thought she was in the bath. Videos marked private that had been shared through cloud drives. Some of them weren't even with Micah. There were others. 3, maybe 4. She had lived a whole separate life, layered behind mine like wallpaper under fresh paint. From the outside, we looked solid, stable, engaged. But inside, she carved out entire corridors I never knew existed. She'd been telling people she was technically single, that I was emotionally distant, that I didn't challenge her anymore. I found notes too, digital diary entries stored in a hidden folder named Lists. Each one was a ranking of the men she'd been seeing. The most recent one included Micah at the top. Not for his looks, not for his charm, but for what she described as freedom. Apparently, I was routine. A comfort zone with no edge. I didn't even get a number. But the worst part? The audio. There were recordings she'd made, voice notes, saved voicemails, maybe even hidden recordings. I couldn't tell. Some were just her talking to herself, practicing excuses, rehearsing stories she might need. I listened to one that stopped me cold. "He won't leave. That's the thing. Elwood is the kind of guy who clings even harder when he's slipping. I feel bad sometimes, but mostly I feel relieved. It's like letting go of a balloon you pretended to care about." I don't remember breathing while I played it. Just sat there staring at the playback bar crawl forward like a slow knife. And then came the recording that rewrote everything. A phone call between her and her sister, the one I always thought was on my side. "I think he suspects something," Brianna said. Her sister laughed. "So? He won't do anything. He never does. He's not that guy." "Exactly," Brianna replied. "That's what makes this so easy. That broke me in a different way. Not just the betrayal, but the knowing. The calculated nature of it all. The way they assessed me like I was a prop in a play they'd been writing behind my back. A harmless, passive placeholder they could move around when necessary. I had been edited out of my own life, and no one had even bothered to inform me. I left the hotel room at midnight. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there. I drove through empty streets, past the grocery store where we bought our first dinner ingredients, past the coffee shop where she once doodled our initials on a napkin, past the park where I nearly proposed before changing my mind last minute. It all looked the same. And yet, it wasn't mine anymore. By 2 a.m., I found myself outside her apartment. Yes, I still called it hers in my head. I didn't go in. I didn't knock. I just sat in the car and stared at the window where the light in the bedroom used to flicker when she stayed up reading. It was off now. She was probably asleep. Or maybe she wasn't alone. I thought about leaving a note. Thought about knocking just to see what she'd say. But then I remembered her words. "That's what makes this so easy." And I realized she'd only lied because she was sure I wouldn't walk away. So I did. For real this time. And I took the recordings with me. I didn't go back to the hotel that night. I kept driving until the sky shifted from black to blue and the silence around me began to feel less like emptiness and more like clarity. At some point, I ended up near the coast, not a place we ever visited together, which was exactly the point. I pulled off the road when I spotted a diner with a crooked neon sign and a board that read, "Hot coffee, no judgment." That was enough. I went inside, ordered eggs I didn't touch, and sat by the window as light crept across the parking lot. My phone buzzed a few times. I didn't check it. I already knew who it was. She had probably noticed the missing charger. The quiet. The vacuum where my presence used to be. She thought I'd beg. She thought I'd break. But I didn't. Instead, I called Nolan. It was the first real conversation I'd had in weeks. I told him everything. Not just about the cheating or the double life, but about how small I had started to feel long before any of it. How I'd bent myself into shapes just to keep her comfortable. How I'd stopped asking for affection because I didn't want to hear excuses. How I kept making space for her while she built walls in mine. He didn't say much at first, just listened. And then he said something that stuck. You didn't lose her, man. You finally stopped pretending she was yours. That line hit different. Because he was right. I wasn't walking away from something whole. I was walking away from an illusion I'd been too scared to let go of. I spent the next few days off the grid, really off. No social media. No location sharing. No familiar routines. I took long walks without earbuds. I wrote in a notebook I hadn't touched since college. I even signed up for a drop-in art class at a nearby community center where I painted something awful and didn't apologize for it. And then I did the most un-Elwood thing I've ever done. I emailed myself the audio files. Not to blackmail her. Not to hurt her. Just to let them go. I put them in a locked folder and archived it. I wanted a record. Not revenge. I wanted to remember what I survived, not relive it. When I finally returned home, a different home, not ours, I left her a single message. I won't expose you. I won't talk about you. I won't chase you. But I won't carry you anymore either. You don't get to live in my chest rent-free. Not anymore. She didn't respond. Maybe she never read it. Maybe she did. It doesn't matter. A few months passed. The world didn't end. The pain didn't vanish overnight, but it got quieter, softer, like an old scar that stops throbbing and just becomes part of you. I started sleeping better, eating better. I stopped checking her profiles, stopped waiting for the apology that would never come. One evening, while walking past a bookstore, I noticed a flyer on the window. It was for a local writer's circle. No pressure, no judgment, just stories. So I joined. And that's how this post started. As a story I needed to write for myself before I could write anything else. Not for her. Not for sympathy. Just for closure. Because sometimes, healing doesn't come from getting answers. It comes from finally deciding you deserve better than questions. I do. And if you've read this far, maybe you do too.